Hi everyone, welcome to this week. We're going to continue our look at tenses in the subjunctive, but focusing on sequence of tense, and then we'll start learning some uses of the subjunctive with some adverbial clauses. All right. So the idea with sequence of tense is right here, this time relationship. What that means is that tense is relative rather than absolute, and so the tense that we've been dealing with so far is absolute tense. The present tense is the present tense. The past tense is the past tense, right? That is tense that doesn't change. With sequence of tense, we're dealing with what we call relative tense, meaning that the tense of the subjunctive is translated or conceived of in relationship to the tense of the main verb. All right, and so those relationships are right here. So time contemporaneous is also known as same time, and then time before, and then time after. So the action of the subordinate verb happens at the same time, before, or after the action of the main verb. All right, and so when you're dealing with sequence of tense, the most important thing is the tense of the main verb. So the tense of the main verb is going to be your determining factor. That will determine what the what the sequence will be. All right, so when we're dealing with subjunctive subordinate verbs, your main verbs have two groups. So either non-past verbs or past verbs, okay? So non-past verbs are basically going to be your present and future. Future includes future perfect, though that's relatively rare. And then past is going to be your imperfect, your perfect, your pluperfect. All right? So non-past, present, future, future perfect, past, imperfect, perfect, pluperfect. And then the non-past are going to be what are called primary tenses, and the past are going to be what are called secondary tenses. And we'll talk about the sequence of tense in terms of primary sequence of tense and secondary sequence of tense based on the tense of the main verb. So again, the tense of your main verb is going to be the most important part. All right? And here's like a little chart that makes it, that sort of lays it out for you. All right? So in other words, these down here are tenses of the subjunctive, the tense of the subjunctive. And what this is saying is if you're dealing with a non-past verb, or primary sequence, then you're only going to be dealing with the present subjunctive or the perfect subjunctive. And again, this is why it's so important to determine the tense of the main verb. So if you have a non-past main verb, again, that's subjunctive independent, indicative, whatever it might be, then you're going to be dealing with the present or the perfect subjunctive. If you have a past main verb, right, so imperfect, pluperfect, imperfect, perfect, pluperfect, then you're going to be dealing in the subjunctive with the imperfect and the pluperfect. So these boxes are fairly inviolable. You'll have some exceptions, but you'll have to get fairly deep into Latin to kind of run across those exceptions. So primary sequence, only the present and the perfect subjunctive. Secondary sequence, only the imperfect and the pluperfect subjunctive. Again, keep these kind of boxes in mind. On the left here are the relationships. So present and imperfect indicate same time or after. Perfect and pluperfect indicate time before. Okay, so you've got these vertical boxes about what tenses can be used with what main verb tenses, and then these horizontal boxes that have to do with relationships. But again, those are fairly inviolable. Imperfect isn't going to indicate time before. Pluperfect isn't going to indicate same time. All right, so take some time to sort of get used to this chart, so make sure you sort of understand it, at least in concept and theory, because then we'll see it in action. All right, here's another way to look at it. I just put sort of boxes around it, so that way my red boxes don't cause extra confusion. But again, these are the tenses of the main verb. This is primary sequence. This is secondary sequence going down, of course. All right, and then your time relationships are the ones going over. All right, so again, if this is more helpful, if this is a little clearer, take some time to get to back here. You identify the tense of the verb in that exercise, you find it here, and then you figure out what's to the left, what relationship it indicates. Back to the chart, present and imperfect, right? Time contemporaneous, same time, slash. I go back to my chart, pluperfect and perfect are really perfect and pluperfect, but both of those are time before chart. All right, so just some exercises to get you practicing with this. So all you're doing is identifying the time relationship. All right, so in other words, number one, tremuiscent indicates that it's a pluperfect verb. That indicates that its relationship is before. All right. Akadamas, that A tells me that it's a present subjunctive. Present subjunctive indicates that same time or after relationship. All right. So tulerint, that ERI tells me that it's a perfect subjunctive. That's going to indicate before. And just to get all of them in there, apropos quarem, all right, that's an imperfect subjunctive. That's going to indicate same time or after. And again, note my same time or after is right, number 2 and number 6, present and imperfect after. If I go to my befores, that's number 1 and number 3, pluperfect. All right, so get some practice just identifying that relationship. All right, so here's a text that sort of illustrates things from Cicero's against Catiline. All right, so what's the tense of the main verb of the sentence? And that is going to be exponam, which is here. All right, and so that with that am is going to be a future. It could technically be a present subjunctive, but for sequence of tense, either one is going to get us into which sequence? Primary sequence, right? So we got a non-past main verb, and that's going to get us into primary sequence. So that takes care of number 2, right? What sequence? That's going to be primary. All right, so the subjunctive verb that depends on exponam, that is going to be censuerit. All right, and then with that eri, all right, that is going to be a perfect subjunctive. And as we know, even though it doesn't ask it, perfect subjunctive indicates time before in primary sequence. All right, shifting gears a little bit just to see how these work. All right, so this is our first really use of the subjunctive in a dependent clause, and this is just adverbial clauses, so clauses that indicate adverbial things, when, how, because of what, those sorts of things. And so what you got is essentially various categories: circumstance, cause, concession, and then the Latin word that sort of introduces them. And you can see the examples here, and I would really just focus on the examples down here. They're going to be your best bet in terms of learning them. Cum basically can just be translated when, since, because, although, after, etc. To some extent, that'll have to do with its tense. So, for instance, here, mi siset, excuse me, as a pluperfect, when he had sent the letter, he departed. Excuse me again. You can hear how in English that can very easily be rendered after as well. So after he had sent the letter, he departed. So with the pluperfect subjunctive, you're often going to translate cum as after. All right. The tricky part is there really is nothing in the cum clause to tell you how it should be translated. You have to go purely by context, by sense. But that means that not everything is going to be wrong, right? There could be 2 correct readings of cum, and that's fine as long as they make sense and as long as they work. Excuse me. You can see in all the cum clauses subjunctive verbs. All right. And what we're dealing with here, of course, is this idea of sequence of tense. So if you look at the main verb here in the first example, discessit is a perfect verb, right? And misiset indicates time before the perfect, which of course is the pluperfect. So he departed, that's our discessit. He departed, all right, after he had sent the letter. All right. If we go down, let's see. All right, these are both same time. So we go down to the next one, present tense, present subjunctive, right? He stays because he is afraid to sail. So if that were timuerit, perfect subjunctive, he stays on the shore because he was afraid to sail. Note how the changing of the tense changes the tense of the translation. The good news about the subjunctive sequence of tense is that more often than not, the subjunctive verb is just going to be translated the way it looks. So in that first example, cum literas misiset, pluperfect subjunctive, translated to pluperfect. All right. The next 2 examples, timeat and sit, the present subjunctives translated as a present subjunctive. And then this will just go through with some different examples and some different words. I'm not going to go through all of them because they're straightforward. All right. So here's an adverbial clause text. All right, so cum appears 3 times in the first line. All right, and really the first sentence, I should say. So 1, 2, 3. All right, how many are conjunctions and how many are prepositions? So what this is getting at, of course, is that cum can be either a conjunction, introducing one of these clauses, or a preposition meaning with, right, with an ablative object. The best way to answer this question, the best way to approach this is by context. So, for instance, the first one, you've got esset right after cum. Cum followed by a subjunctive verb, very good chance that that is going to be a conjunction. All right, down here, next example, cum followed by a preposition. All right, doesn't necessarily indicate explicitly that it's going to be a conjunction, but certainly indicates that it's not going to be a preposition. It would be very rare to have one preposition, cum, followed by another preposition, cum, or ex, excuse me. So by process of elimination, cum is going to be a conjunction. Now down here, third one, cum is followed by an ablative, and an ablative. That, on the other hand, is seriously going to suggest that cum is a preposition. All right, so again, cum itself is not going to tell you, but the context around it is going to help. So mark out each cum clause, this is number 2, from beginning to end, underline the subjunctive verb in each. So cum esset, right, so there is the beginning, all right, esset's already underlined as the subjunctive verb, and it's going to go all the way down to decaderet, and we're going to have one more subjunctive verb in decaderet, all right. Now technically we could say this is one cum clause, and then this is a second cum clause. Really that's just going to be a judgment call in terms of how you really want to structure things. All right, and then you've got a cum clause here. Technically, qua is part of the cum clause. There's esset, the subjunctive verb. All right, cum clause here, subjunctive verb. All right, and then this one ends there. I'm just confirming that. Nope. Ends there. All right, so here are this week's summaries. All right, so a reading, and then there's your reading a little smaller, but with the vocab. So I'll just do a little bit of it, and then we'll go from there. Hercules cum ad Cerbrum esset missus ab Eurystheo rege, et cum licus Neptuni filius, puta viset eam per isse megaram uxorum eos, et filius interficere voluit et regnum occupare. Whew, that's quite a sentence. All right, so when you've got a sentence like this, best bet is to start kind of making it a little smaller. So for instance, right, I can probably say that that is one separate clause and just deal with that before I move on to the next stuff. So when Hercules, cum Hercules, right, had been sent to Cerberus, the three-headed dog in the underworld, by Eurystheus and by King Eurystheus. All right, so when Hercules had been sent to Cerberus by King Eurystheus. All right, now, the cum in brackets means that we're starting another cum clause. All right, and when, dot, 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 dot. All right, so and when at cum Licus. All right, now Licus is the son of Neptune. So, and when Licus, the son of Neptune, had thought, puta visse. All right, now if you remember, we're shifting into indirect statement. All right. Had thought that he had killed Megara, his wife, and he wanted to kill his sons and occupy the kingdom. All right, now I just want to check one thing. So Hercules, all right, so when Hercules had been sent, whoop, just kidding. Made a mistake early on. See, it didn't quite register, so I realized I made a mistake early on. I went back, I kind of redid things, and I checked things. So my mistake was Hercules here is actually the subject of the main clause. It's also the subject of the missus est, but it also functions as the subject of the main clause. So really, it might be useful to put a comma there. All right, so Hercules, comma, when he had been sent by King Eurystheus to Cerberus, and when Licus, all right, had thought that Licus, son of Neptune, had thought that he killed Megara, his wife, all right, he, Hercules, wanted to kill his sons and take over the kingdom. All right, so that's Sorry about that. Hit a wrong button. That was a little pause. So they went home is going to put us in the secondary sequence. Secondary sequence, same time, is imperfect subjunctive. So we need the imperfect subjunctive for apropinquo. So, oh, need the pen there. There we go. So apropinquaret. All right is my imperfect subjunctive. All right. So cum amicis domum venerunt. All right. All right. That is going to be it for this week. Please be in touch if you have any questions, and I'll be here next week. Thanks.